Hey, what is up guys, it's Shafi from Cooves, and today we are continuing on our Instagram reality series, this time with episode 2. Like with every video, I'd like to put out the disclaimer that I'm not trying to actually target anyone or injure their brand, but we're here to actually look at and learn about how photo editing is done, especially on Instagram. Alright, so as requested, we're making longer videos with more in-depth analysis, so let's just crack right into it. Alright, so our first picture is quite simple. We're starting off slow and easy. There isn't a lot of editing going on other than just the face being retouched. In terms of retouching, we're talking skin makeup and a bit of skin smoothing using frequency separation, which is something that's covered on Pixel Perfect's channel. I would also like to point out that there's a bit of Liquify tool going on, just a little bit, just a smudge going on, because her facial structure from the picture on the right is alright, it's pretty good to be fair, and the one on the left isn't that far off, so if there is any Liquify tool going on, I would guess that it's probably in the chin region, so that chin might have just been pushed a little bit forwards and a bit inwards. If you just suck in your cheeks and pout, like in the blue steel look that Mario Adrian describes here, it is definitely doable, and I've seen it in many photos working as an editor. Now, in terms of color, there isn't a whole lot I can use to figure out if she's done much, especially in the background, since there's no background picture present, it's just her face in frame. And for that reason, I would just assume that she's used a bit of a contrast on the cheeks. That could just be makeup, but you can also do that in Photoshop, just adding some shadows and darkening the cheekbones a bit, just to give it that pop. With all that being said, I'll only give this a 2 out of 5 in terms of the editing used. Alright, so moving right along, we are going into something a bit absurd, fitness motivation. This picture is actually really quite hard, and I probably shouldn't have put a second, but there is a lot going on. There is a couple of things going on that I really wouldn't know, I wouldn't even know where to begin, especially with the nipples. Where are his nipples? Were they edited? And if they were edited out, why would they be edited out? That's so odd to me. Secondly, his waist to hip ratio is very, very good. Like, I'm talking IFBB pro bodybuilder level good. And for that reason, I mean, men generally don't edit their waists, but it could be a case, and it could just be refraction from the water below, because he is standing partially submerged in water, and for that reason I really wouldn't make much of a comment on the type of editing used here. Rather, we can still talk about the composition, where he's just trying to accentuate his broad shoulders, because that is something you can't really fake. You can't really fake your shoulders in Liquify tool, because when you do, it does stretch it out, and it looks very blurry when you try it. It's very obvious. It's just one of those things you can't do. But like with waists and your other body features, you can shorten things, but you can't lengthen them in the Liquify tool. It's just one of the drawbacks that we have. Now, with all of that preface being said, if we zoom into the photo, we can actually see there is a lot of blurriness, and now I'm a bit suspicious, especially with the length of his clavicle to the ball of his shoulder joint. That's definitely disproportionate. He would have Michael Phelps-like proportions, and except he probably doesn't have the Michael Phelps-like height to justify that kind of shoulder to clavicle ratio. Also, if you pay close attention, you'll see that his left side is considerably longer than his right side, which is why it looks so odd in the first place. It's just, I'd say it's a really bad Photoshop job, and it's so bad that it leaves you confused. It's just, what if this guy actually does look like that? So my verdict on this photo is that he's either a freak of nature, he's a swimming athlete, or this is a very bad Photoshop job. It's one of those three. And I would give this a 3 out of 5 in terms of fakeness. Alrighty, this next photo, it's just way too easy. These wavy line pictures, they're just, how do people not notice that? Do you not look at your own photo after you've finished editing it? And why would you? Okay, so me personally, if I'm ever recommending photoshopping an image, and sometimes we do have to Photoshop images for clients. Generally, I would never ever tell them to stand in front of anything straight, just for this exact reason. It's so easy to detect, and trying to fix this issue is super hard. It takes a lot of time. You basically have to cut out that section from the original image and then like stitch it on to the edited image, just to avoid that bending of the lines. But this is so straightforward. The lines are bent. It's an obvious Liquify tool. Like I said before, when you use the Liquify tool, you move adjacent pixels with the waist in this case. So when you're shortening your waist, you're also shortening the lines, which causes them to not be straight and parallel. So this next one is from Beauty Faults. I think most of you know about Beauty Faults. It's an Instagram page that showcases basically what we're doing here, and my only criticism of Beauty Faults is that sometimes they do misrepresent images. Sometimes when images aren't even edited, like the one I'm going to tell you about now, they do try to just pick out the worst photo and the best photo of someone and try to basically shame them into suggesting something, or like just being implicit and not being too straightforward and honest about how they're going about getting these photos. And for that reason, I am a bit critical of Beauty Faults, but nonetheless, this is a good example to talk about. In terms of the Liquify tool being used here, I really wouldn't criticize her too much for any of this, because if you look at her waist, even in the worst photo that Beauty Faults could find of her, it's already pretty symmetrical and well shaped. And even and in the edited photo, or the supposedly edited photo, it's also it bears a similar proportion and shape to the non-edited one. And for that reason, I really can't fault it, or I can't detect anything myself. If you look at the shade of the green water in the right image with the shade of the sky in the left image, it tells me that there's a lot of color grading going on. Especially her tan skin is a big giveaway if you look at the two images. Another thing is that the water should reflect the shade of the sky, because that's just how water reflects light, and them not being the same tells me that she did edit the colors in a post-processing software. However, to her credit, that's not much of a sin, because almost all of our photos have to be color graded just because of how cameras pick up light. They're not as good as our eyes, and it's just not fair to the photographer if you can't pick up what our eyes can see. One more thing is that from the left image, it might look like she edited her thigh gap. I'm not really sure what the deal is with that, but I would not say that she actually did, even if it might look like it did, because of how difficult it is to edit straight lines. When you do use the Liquify tool, like I mentioned before, it does create jagged lines, and in this case there are no jagged lines, especially on the striped beach towel that she's sitting on. Overall, I would give her a 1 out of 5. I think she's done a pretty legitimate job in the photo. So again, we're using another Beauty Faults image, even though I don't really like them, and it's to highlight the power of skin retouching. So if you look at the two images, I wouldn't say that there's a whole lot of Liquify tool going on. Maybe just around the cheeks, the lower cheekbone, and the jawline might just be smoothed up a bit, but then again, that's just an angle thing. I mean, you can just as easily achieve that with an angle and a blue still look. Now, to be completely fair with her skin tone, complexion and porosity match the edited photo very, very closely. I wouldn't even say that she's skin retouched it a whole lot. I don't know, maybe the picture is very low quality on the unedited version, and for that reason I can't really make out the details, but the edited version just has a bit more contrast and a better lighting situation. On the right, it looks like she's in her car, so obviously it's a lot darker. But the edited photo has a slight color gradient where she adjusts her olive skin tone to have a bit more of a tan. Now, I was going to give her a 1 out of 5 in terms of how it's edited, which is, the lower score is better obviously, but if you look at her philtrum, and that's the part directly under the tip of the nose, you'll notice that it's more upturned on the image on the left than the one on the right, and this is part of making your nose less aquiline, where an aquiline nose is considered beak-shaped or eagle-shaped, and people generally don't prefer that in the Western beauty standard, which is why it's often changed and edited, especially the dorsal hump, which is the bridge of your nose. So I just had to get a second opinion from some of my med school friends. That part in particular is called the infatrip break, and when you move that also moves the tip of the nose up, and as you can see from the two images, it's pretty obvious. I just wanted you to be able to put it into words as to why it looks different. Oh no, it's another one of these. Okay, so as you can see, the lamppost is bending because her booty's so big that it warps gravity and time, and for that reason we can see that her waist has also been moved inwards. Like I said before, if you guys really want to do this kind of editing, do not stand in front of anything complex. Alright, the simple rule is stand in front of a white background and you can do anything to the photo. Like you can Photoshop yourself in a plane like this guy did here. Also, Coves has a service where we can do the editing for you, but that's not open just yet because we're focused on teaching the content first before we take in submissions. This picture is also very oversaturated. I can tell because her dress, which I'm guessing was probably like some kind of orange, it has now turned fluorescent and it just hurts to look at. And if you look at the sky and the white snow, it's off-white, so there's definitely been a filter applied. I would say a filter rather than a lookup table because a lookup table is selective, whereas a filter is for everything, and in this case the white snow has turned off-white. Righto. So that was the last picture of today. I really enjoy making these videos because it just lets me talk about all these concepts that you learn about in like art school and other places, and you don't really get to talk about in a accessible way. I don't really get to teach it to very many people because it's not something you really think about until it's pointed out to you. So that's the goal of this series. I'm trying to point things out that you don't really think about, and I'm training your eye to pick these things out as you learn about it yourself.